must embrace is not a simple change of political structure or economic policy, but rather a complete revolution of consciousness and awareness within the human mind.
Tonight's lead story deals with gun control and the United Nations. A few days ago, the Obama administration defied the United States Senate by voting to approve a United Nations arms treaty that has drawn a significant amount of criticism from both politicians and journalists. The treaty requires countries to create internal mechanisms to ensure that their arms exports aren't likely to be used to harm civilians or violate human rights laws. Senator James Inhofe, a Republican from Oklahoma, had this to say: "The UN arms treaty that passed in the General Assembly today would require the United States to implement gun control legislation as required by the treaty, which could supersede the laws our elected officials have already put into place." The National Rifle Association has opposed the treaty, stating the agreement is in conflict with the Second Amendment of the Constitution because it regulates the trade of small arms and calls for the creation of an end-user registry. 53 senators voiced their disapproval late last month by voting in favor of a non-binding amendment to a Senate budget resolution to stop the United States from entering the treaty. Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott warned President Obama not to sign the treaty. He said, "If you sign it and if the United States Senate ratifies the treaty, Texas will lead the charge to have the treaty overturned in court as a violation of the Constitution." Secretary of State John Kerry said the treaty would strengthen global security while protecting the rights of countries to conduct legitimate arms trade. The Obama administration said the U.S. is already enforcing the standards of the treaty, but is intended to force smaller nations that export arms to follow the same regulations, though critics say otherwise. The UN panel responsible for the treaty nearly disbanded when North Korea, Iran, and Syria refused to give consensus. The Obama administration, which had initially insisted on complete group consensus, was adamant in its passage. The treaty was passed by a vote of 154 to 3, with North Korea, Iran, and Syria being the only 3 countries that voted in opposition. I have a few questions about this. Why would the United Nations do this? Why would the President of the United States, a country that values itself on the ideals of freedom, support such a thing? And why do we, as Americans, allow our liberty to be sacrificed in the name of security? And let us not forget Operation Fast and Furious, in the practice known as gunwalking, where United States federal officials knowingly sold firearms to extremely violent drug cartels in Mexico in a supposed effort to track these cartel members. Firearms from these transactions were found at the murder scene of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry, as well as countless other victims of the drug war. Just a reminder that the politicians that work to restrict the gun rights of people like you and me are the same ones that sell weapons to violent criminals. Can we trust these people? Do they have our best interests in mind? Tell us what you think in the comments section below.